media's called up to police headquarters. A big story is brewing. The media is stunned to hear that the person who's alleged to have done this is Harry Blackburn, the former superintendent who was in charge of scientific, and this is probably one of the most shameful moments for the New South Wales Police. Rumours start to circulate that Clive Small is corrupt. Weeks later, found all these alibis, all this evidence that says Harry Blackburn did not do it. All the evidence was that the New South Wales Police had got the wrong man.
When I was in the police, former Superintendent Harry Blackburn was wrongfully charged with 25 serious offences. It was a masterclass in how not to run an investigation. It's just one of the many devastating cases veteran journalist Neil Mercer examines in his new book, Falsely Convicted. In part 2 of our chat, we pull apart exactly how wrongful convictions happen. It includes unreliable memory, false confessions, police and prosecutors' incompetence, and how vulnerable people, particularly First Nations Australians, are too often denied the chance to properly exercise their right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Have a listen. I think you're going to be fascinated by what we talk about. Neil Mercer, welcome back to part 2 of I Catch Killers.
Thank you.
For those that listened to part 1, Neil and I had lengthy discussion about some of the cases that resulted in people being falsely convicted, and it's quite frightening when you think about it, because the courts are set up. There's a lot of checks and balances in place.
There are, and look, I think most of the time it works. I'm not here to pull down or to argue we need a brand new legal system or anything like that, particularly, and it's all relative, particularly when you look at what's happening in the United States, say.
True.
But there are times when the system gets it wrong, and people say, half the people in prison say they're innocent, and I go, yeah, I know, and that's obviously not true. But occasionally, some people are. They are. Yeah. They are innocent, and they have been wrongly convicted. And the 9 cases go through, as we discussed, a range of reasons why, where the system fell down. Was it corruption? Was it misconduct? Or was it just incompetence?
It quite often, and it looks like it's a combination of all those things. I, as a police officer, I was frustrated sometimes at the protections that were put in place to protect the accused person. But having said that, I fully understood the need for it. So it was just, okay, there's a lot of protections there. With homicide investigations, it's very rare that you'd have someone plead guilty to murder, so they were quite often contested in the courts. And very rarely, when I convicted someone of murder or someone was convicted of murder, did they not lodge an appeal at some stage. So that became the norm. My frustration was that if the courts get it wrong in convicting someone, they may, and this is the flip side, they may also get it wrong in acquitting people. I put that to the test on the back of the Bowraville case with campaigning very publicly for the double jeopardy legislation that came in, where if someone had been acquitted for a crime, there was now provision to have that person recharged if it was fresh and compelling evidence and in the interests of justice, which was a high level to obtain. And even with the Bowraville matter, and it was brought in specifically for the Bowraville case, we got it to the high courts, but decisions were made that we couldn't prosecute it. So to me, that was a way of acknowledging that there are failings in the courts, not just from the prosecution side of things when someone's wrongly convicted, but when someone might be acquitted where the evidence should have been to the contrary. So we've got all those protections in place, but we still stuff it up on occasions. On occasions.
I can understand the frustrations of police officers, not as well as you or the detectives I've met over many years. I can understand that you can feel constrained by the law, but as you say, there is that protection there that I don't have to say anything to you if I don't want to. I have the right to silence, and I think and the presumption of innocence, all those things. The cases I've looked at, I've sort of tried to do cases that are different and that might inform people as to how things go wrong, where they go wrong, whether it's tunnel vision or the use of prison informants, say, which was very popular at one stage, particularly by the then National Crime Authority.
And wasn't that fraught with danger?
That all fell in a heap.
Yeah.
And an embarrassing, to say the least, heap. There's misidentification evidence. Identification evidence, as you know, as all detectives and lawyers know, is notoriously unreliable.
Well, the memory.
I can see something that happened across the street, and the person next to me might see something almost completely different.
Yeah.
And we're not lying.
No, that's your
we're acting in good faith.
Of it. Yeah.
That's my recollection. So there's cases in there where somebody's been convicted on identification evidence, and again, the identification evidence has got a bit better with time.
Yeah. As
the months went on, and when they finally appear in court, rather than sort of perhaps saying, as they did originally, "Oh, I'm not sure," or "Yeah, I think that's him," they go, "Yeah, that's him."
Yeah.
Which, from a prosecution point of view, is great, but it's not what they said at the beginning.
Again, it's because people that don't understand the system, and they put trust in police, they put trust in the media. What the media is reporting, well, it's reported in the media, so therefore it must be true. And then the legal system, well, these people are a lot smarter than I am, so you can see why it goes wrong. Speaking of going wrong, and I think this one's an indefensible one, but the Harry Blackburn case. I'm an ex-New South Wales police officer. It's not our proudest moment. It's balanced out by we had someone as competent as Clive Small reviewing the case. Do you want to tell us about that case? Because that I knew about it. It's folklore in New South Wales Police, but I got a little bit more understanding of it from what you covered in the book.
Well, you talk about the role of the media in some cases, and this is a classic case. Harry Blackburn, this is 1989 in Sydney. Harry Blackburn is an ex-New South Wales police officer. He rose to the rank of superintendent. He was in charge of scientific. He's left the police force on good terms and gone to work for the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department in a particular role. In 1989, one day the media's called up to police headquarters. You've got to leave all your recording devices behind. This is an off-the-record briefing. This is a big deal. A big story is brewing. And they're then briefed in great detail about how the New South Wales Police have been reinvestigating a series of historical rapes. Some occurred in the late 70s, some around 1985-88. So there's two sets of sexual assaults. The reporters are told they've been done by the same man, and they all occurred south in the southern suburbs of Sydney. The media is stunned to hear that the person who's alleged to have done this is Harry Blackburn, the former superintendent who was in charge of scientific. It's even more stunning because at this stage Harry's not been arrested. He's actually at work, oblivious to the fact as to what's about to happen. The media's given all the details, so the radio, TV, newspapers are all set to go when Harry gets arrested. About an hour or so later, he comes down in the lift, makes a joke to his mate because he sees all these blokes in suits standing around and goes, "Oh, looks like there's a raid on." And they come up to him and say, "Mr. Blackburn, you're under arrest." There's no big deal. You're under arrest. Yeah. It was rather a big deal. He's taken to a particular place. The media's been told where he's going to be taken to. Long and short of it is he's charged with being a serial rapist. Yeah. And he is then, and this is probably one of the most shameful moments for the New South Wales Police, he's walked from where he's been interviewed, where he's sort of denied anything or not said anything. He's walked in front of multiple TV cameras, newspapers, media, radio, everybody, for a considerable length of time. So we, the media...
All of which would have been given the heads up.
Oh, yeah. It was approved. It was actually approved by the most senior police in the New South Wales police force. In fact, at the earlier media briefing, the reporters were told that this whole Operation Photo, had been, under the close supervision of the Commissioner, but in particular Assistant Commissioner Tony Lauer. He had something called executive oversight.
I don't know what that means.
Well, that's join the club.
Yeah.
In the end, nobody knew what that meant, and therein lies part of the problem. Harry's walked in front of the media. His vision of him walking out of the police station after he's been interviewed is all over the media. The story goes around the world.
Yeah.
It was even appeared in a paper in Istanbul.
Yeah.
That he is former senior cop charged with being a serial rapist. It's even more crazy when you realise that identification evidence in that case was crucial. On the night of Harry's arrest, 2 of the police involved are driving home in the early hours of the morning and they have a terrible accident.
Yep.
The officer who was apparently in charge suffers brain damage. The investigation or the preparation of the brief of evidence to put Harry Blackburn before the court is in disarray. They call in a detective by the name of Clive Small, who at that stage was a detective inspector.
Yep.
And what he finds is an investigation in disarray because statements have not been properly taken, things haven't been written down. He's got to reinvestigate the whole thing because on the face of it, it looks like Harry might be the wrong bloke. At that stage, in 1989, I was working as a reporter for ABC TV, Four Corners, and I remember getting a phone call from somebody who said, I want to talk to you about the Harry Blackburn case. And I said, oh, yeah, I've seen him. He's obviously, I thought he was guilty as hell.
Yeah, the way, the confidence in which it was played out.
Exactly, the confidence. I mean, the confidence of the police. They had a press conference on the night of his arrest. He's walked in front of the cameras. We've got him. And I thought, good work, good work. The bloke on the other end says, he's the wrong man. I said, well, what do you mean? There's not enough evidence, it's just the brief's a bit shy of a gallop. And he said, no, he's the wrong blood group. And I remember going, that can't be right. Anyway, I start making some investigations and I meet with Harry Blackburn's lawyers and I meet with Harry Blackburn. And he says, I'm innocent. This is a shocking mistake. I'm prepared to do an interview, if you're prepared to look at some of the facts in this matter. So I then went off on an investigation and I'd been given the statement of facts in which a lot of the details of the case had been laid out, it had been handed up in court. And I found a number of the witnesses who, and this includes women who were sexually assaulted. The MO of this offender from the late 70s and 85 to 88 was he was a sort of a lover's lane person. He would sneak up on young couples in cars in isolated areas, grab the bloke, lock the bloke in the boot and rape the women. I had these names of men and women and I tracked down, and this is when I knew that something was seriously wrong, not just what I'd been told in that phone call. I tracked down one of the women who had been sexually assaulted and she agreed to speak but not on camera. So I went to her home and I remember chatting to her and it's a very difficult conversation. It's naturally. Towards the end of it, I said something like, so you think Harry Blackburn's guilty? He's the man? And she said, oh no, he's far too old. The person who assaulted me was much, much younger. I said, did you tell the police that? She said, oh yeah. And I said, did they put that in your statement? And she said, no, they left that bit out. And I can still remember that moment really clearly. I just thought, holy shit, they've left, how are they going to jump over that hurdle in court?
Yeah.
I think in the end they were not going to call her. I found another witness who was an eyewitness. It was a bloke who'd been in the car with his girlfriend, who'd given a positive, quote unquote, identification to police. He was interviewed him. This is all on this one was on camera.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what did you see? And he said, the bloke came to the side of the car. He had a balaclava on. Said, don't do anything stupid, and it'll all be okay. Drags him out, puts him in the boot. So he's seen a figure in a balaclava at 1 o'clock in the morning for about 3 seconds. And I said to him, the police say you've made a positive identification. He goes, yeah, that's right. And this is the gist of the conversation, Gary. I can't remember the exact words. But I said, hypothetically, if you were in court now, could you identify Harry Blackburn as the man? He said, no. I said, well, so how positive were you? And he said, I was about 75%. And the investigators said, that's good enough for us. And I just went, wow. And there were a couple more interviews like that. It was one of the more extraordinary cases, and things then got really complicated. Yeah. Because Detective Inspector Clive Small has taken over the brief after the investigators had the car accident. Rumours start to circulate that, and the rumours start to circulate at the same time I'm preparing a story for Four Corners, that Clive Small is corrupt, that he's gutted the brief, that, in the beginning there was a really good brief and he's now deliberately making it poor, so that, Harry Blackburn won't be prosecuted.
Is that when the dark...
this is the white... That's right. Absolutely. This is white nights and black nights.
Yeah.
So...
you can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. And, as... I had to go and see Clive because I've heard the rumours, and I was saying, at his home, and I said, Clive, these are the rumours. He was really, really upset, as you would be. And he said, look, the brief... I'm preparing this brief. The brief will stand the test of time. Yeah. Anyway, I'm very nervous, and Four Corners is very nervous because these rumours are going around Parliament. Yeah. They're coming. The ministers are talking about them. Reporters are going, Clive Small's corrupt. So but Small presses on with his investigation, and finds that a number of the witnesses, in fact 3 of the women, have told police Harry Blackburn was not the man. Yeah. And that he's got alibis. On one of them, he's at a police conference in Darwin.
It's a hard one to get over.
It's a hard one to get over. On another, he's got a friend who remembers them being in Newcastle on a particular race day for particular reasons. And there's another one where other police officers remember being with him on that weekend at another police conference. Mm. The case was that one man's done all of these. He's the wrong blood group. He's got alibis which are rock solid. He's with other police officers. Clive Small, in his report to the hierarchy, they're not very happy to hear from Clive.
No, I'm sure they wouldn't be, because it was the hierarchy that were blowing the trumpet.
It was the hierarchy going, we're capable of catching our own. Yeah. We've done a brilliant job. We've used the latest DNA. We've done this. We've been to London. And Tony Lau, the Assistant Commissioner, who was in prime pole position to be the next
Neil,
Commissioner.
I'm going to have to stop you here. Are you alleging that police would be making operational decisions based on promotional opportunities? Outrageous.
Outrageous. Shocking. They've allied themselves very closely, really closely. Tony Lau's done a press conference before he heads off to the opera at the Sydney Opera House. So they've said this is a brilliant operation. Weeks later, Clive Small, who's reinvestigated, gone back to the witnesses and found all these alibis, all this evidence that says Harry Blackburn did not do it. Clive goes to the hierarchy. Yeah. As I say, they're not very pleased to see him. Anyway, he prevails. The brief goes to the DPP, Reg Blanche, it was back then, who later says, of the brief of evidence prepared by Inspector Small. It was one of the best briefs I've ever seen.
Well, that's
The charges are dropped, and the government of the day announces an inquiry to be done behind closed doors. Can't have a royal commission. As part of the Four Corners story, I go to see John Dowd, the Attorney General, do an interview with him on camera. Ted Pickering, I think, was the police minister. The interview with Pickering is done on a Friday. We're going to air on Monday. And I'm still pretty nervous about this whole thing because other journos are going, mate, you're cruising for a bruising here. This is Small's corrupt. I've got it completely wrong. I'm really nervous. And I do the interview with Ted Pickering on the Friday. And Pickering, like Dowd before him, says there's absolutely no need for a royal commission. Next day, the Saturday, they announce a royal commission, which was something of a relief, I guess. And we go to air on the Monday, in which we recount all this evidence that Harry Blackburn is in fact not just innocent. We've sort of touched on this earlier, that some people get off charges and you still think, look, he's got off, but I still reckon he did it.
Yeah.
This is not one of those cases. All the evidence was that the New South Wales Police had got the wrong man. And the Royal Commissioner, Justice Jack Lee, does an inquiry and very quickly dismisses the Black Knights versus White Knights stuff as absolute rubbish. There's no evidence for it. And it appears that the case against Blackburn had its beginning 20 years before, with one police officer having, quote, a gut feeling that Harry back then looked like one of the identikit photos. And Harry said to him, well, if you think that's right, stick it in the running sheets, the day-to-day account. Nothing's in the running sheets, but they've got it completely and utterly wrong on so many levels that, it was just extraordinary. And I was very thankful for the Royal Commission because the report that I did was right.
Yep.
He was wrongly accused. He didn't go to jail, so he wasn't ever convicted, but he was certainly convicted in the court of public opinion on the night and in the days after that walk in front of the cameras. I mean,
the horrible situation.
I thought he was guilty.
Yeah, I was in the police then. I remember looking at it going,
got him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Horrendous.
Yeah.
And looking at it, so the identification evidence not right, the blood group's not right, the alibi.
How do you jump over that? And the detectives doing it, I think, were from something called the Tactical Intelligence Group, which, as its name suggests, were not meant to be investigating. They were supposed to be gathering intelligence. And there were other detectives involved. And in the end, as it turns out, nobody knew who was in charge, despite Assistant Commissioner Lau having executive oversight. And even the Royal Commissioner, Jack Lee, made a comment about that. He said, well, whatever that means, nobody knew what that meant. Nobody knew who was running the show. It was a shambles. And one interesting thing here is that if the 2 or 3 police officers who were leading it, if one in particular had not been involved in that accident on the night, and the brief had been let run, the Royal Commissioner said there was every chance Harry Blackburn might have been found guilty because the women who said, no, it's not him, would not have been witnesses. Yeah. And the defence would not have known that they'd said that because they weren't called. It is frightening. It was not one of the highlights of the New South Wales Police, I've got to say. No. And Tony Lau, who'd stood up and used this as an example, I think, of, how we can investigate our own and we can do these things brilliantly. He gets promoted to commissioner.
But on the basis of that, and I think it was something that shaped Clive Small's career because he had to stand up to not being the popular person. Yeah. And I know when he took over crime agencies, which was when they brought all the regional crime squads together and were based in Surrey Hills, Clive headed up that. and the reporting conditions and the way we had to document the investigations, progress reports and all that, a lot of it was set up on the basis of Clive seeing how bad an investigation could go.
And I mean, the fact that nobody knew who was in charge, the fact you had detectives investigating who should not have been investigating, and the fact you had the hierarchy so heavily invested in proving that this guy was guilty, because they've all stood up in front of the world on camera and said, basically said that. It's still a perplexing case, and I'm not sure if I just think it was incompetence. That there was no chain of command.
Yep.
Nobody knew who was doing what. Things weren't being written down, and they were jumping over hurdles, like being the wrong blood group in some of the attacks. When you're alleging that one man's done all, if you're the wrong blood group on their case, if you're the wrong blood group in one group of attacks, you can't have done the others. And I don't know how I think they sort of said they didn't know he was the wrong blood group, but how they would not know that, I can't now recall. I'm sorry.
But these are the things that need to be addressed, and there needs to be operating procedures set in place. And I think, with Clive on the back of that, the progress report. So running a major crime investigation, currently you're reporting on a monthly basis on all the inquiries you've done, reviewing, critiquing. That goes up the chain of command, and it keeps it documented, so people, who's responsible for it.
Yeah.
The chain of command is clearly stated.
You just think, how could it happen? And again, you go back to that lack of experience, the fact they're invested in it, and the supervision was clearly not there. It was a shambles. But I think you're right. I mean, Clive Small standing up to the hierarchy, I think, was a very courageous thing to do, because it'd be very tough for a police officer to stand up to the hierarchy and go, no, I'm right. All you blokes that went on TV, you're all now looking like fools.
I could say I've probably done it a few times, and it hasn't helped. It comes at a cost.
Yeah, it does.
If you step out of line.
Fortunately for Clive, it was such a high-profile case, and there was a Royal Commissioner, and the Royal Commissioner found very heavily in Clive Small's favour and said, I think explicitly, the public or the media should watch Clive Small's career with interest, i.e. whether he gets promoted. So I think, in that sense,
that was a changing of
that was the, the good thing was the government did call a Royal Commission. Quickly. This did not linger on for years in some sort of secret inquiry, in, say, the Crime Commission or whatever it is. That's where they were going to have the original inquiry in the what was then called the State Drug Crime Commission, which is now the New South Wales Crime Commission. So it all would have been behind closed doors. Fortunately, that was scrapped at the last minute, and I'd like to think myself and Four Corners played a little role in forcing that Royal Commission.
Well, sadly, with policing, that incompetence internally can be very easily swept under the carpet. Like if no one's complaining about the incompetence, it goes by the wayside. With homicide investigation, a little bit different in that you're going to get scrutinised one way or the other, because there's going to be an inquest. If you don't charge someone, it's going to be contested at the Supreme Court. If you charge someone, I should say, it's going to be contested at the Supreme Court. If no one is charged, it's going to be scrutinised at the inquest. So there's a bit more accountability. But that wasn't a proud time in New South Wales history and policing history, and reading it, and it's just sort of come back to me how these things happen. But I won't say it's a mystery, but it's confusing how it can all happen. All these people come together to stuff up something that big. Yeah, and it was big. Yeah. He did receive some compensation, Harry. That was on a non-disclosed basis of not to be disclosed. It was said to be well over $1 million. But you talk about the price of some of these things. At the time of his arrest, his wife was pregnant. Yeah. And a month or so later, she miscarried. Oh, you can imagine. And that was, and the hospital said they had little doubt that stress played a part in that. So you talk about the price
on people's lives, that's
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that one. As I said at the end of part one, I just want to go through a couple of things, or just where failings of situations happen. We talked about eyewitness misidentification, and we're just talking about that in the Harry Blackburn one. I've highlighted here false confessions. Now, you would have been around in the days of what was referred to as the police verbal.
Yes, yes.
That's what it was said, where someone goes to court, and I'm sure you sat in courts where, yes, I interviewed the suspect. He declined to make a statement, but he told me, Detective Inspector Jubilant, you're too good for me. You've caught me. I won't sign the entry.
You blokes are too good for me.
Oh, that's the one.
I done it, but I'm not going to sign the statement. There's the 70s and the 80s, and look, I mean, this was mostly not done with straighty 180s or cleanskins. It was done to serious criminals, or mostly.
Yes.
And it was seen. It was a cultural thing, and it had grown up over many, many years, and it was seen as a way of keeping career criminals in particular in line. I'm not saying this is a good thing.
No, I understand where what you're saying, Neil, and I think we need to just focus not just on the police, because the courts were accepting that.
Oh,
and
yes.
The courts are sitting there going, really? But okay.
Here's a bloke that's been through institutions since the age of 11. He's been in jail multiple times. He's as hard as nails, and he's making all these confessions, quote unquote. Not long confessions, but just enough. Yeah. And you're dead right. I mean, magistrates and judges
were accepting
it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I wonder about that. And society was different back in the days. But also, what did you have for investigations? We've got a lot of forensic evidence that can support an investigation now. It basically came down to eyewitnesses, going back, and that's probably a little bit extreme, but it was basically, briefs were based on eyewitness identification and confessions. Yeah. And that's all the police had to play with. Forensic evidence was rapidly coming in, but there wasn't a great deal of it. You had fingerprints, so the crooks got away with that by wearing gloves. That's all they had to do, and put a balaclava on. So that was the environment, but because a lot of people, and it said half jokingly, a police verbal and that, but I always say, they went on, they went through the courts, but the magistrates and the judges and possibly even the jury members were understanding what was going on that was accepted. So it wasn't just police to blame, and that's not condoning what was done. But that was the world.
I think it was an accepted part of the culture at that time. I mean, it started to change during the late 70s, early 80s. I think when the media and the judges and magistrates started to say, look, hang on, things have got to change. Yeah. This is clearly unacceptable. And then sort of electronic recording of interviews came in, which, the old just writing stuff down in shorthand or just making it up went out the window, because you had an electronic recording of somebody, saying or not saying anything. Yeah.
And look, from a policing point of view, when the ERIS interview, so electronically recorded interview of a suspected person, we refer to as ERIS, when that came in, I was a detective and we were all mortified. We've got to put the camera, and I remember I put my hand up and went down to the academy to be trained to train people about the interview, because I thought, well, this is going to change the landscape. Yeah. It's not sitting in an interview room and doing a type record of interview and that type of thing. And it was confronting for police first up when it came in, but I think we've all seen the benefits of it. Yep. And now that unless the admission is caught recorded, it's inadmissible. Yeah. And I think it's a better system, and I think, ironically, it's led to more people pleading guilty too when it's put to them. The only changes I'd like is this right to silence, and before everyone jumps on me and goes, you can't take away the right to silence. Over in England, there's the system that they've got in place is more okay, everyone has the right to silence, but
Yep.
an inference can be drawn from your right from you're not giving your alibi evidence straight up. So if I arrest you and you
Yeah.
can prove straight away that hold it, I was at home with my wife at the time, blah blah blah. If you don't declare that, but you declare it after we've sent the brief of evidence to you and you realise the crucial time that you had to be away, and then you come back and go, oh, this is my alibi witness, because you've created your alibi witness, more weight will be placed on more weight would be placed on it if you spoke up front. So
Yeah.
you still have the right to silence, but there's a varying degree of weight that's placed on it if you don't defend yourself straight away.
Yeah, I can see where I understand exactly where you're coming from. I'm not in favour of that, mainly because I think there are many people,
Yep.
particularly First Nations people,
Yes.
who do
Yep.
not. Maybe they come from remote communities, and there's an example in the book. A young Indigenous bloke from an extremely remote community
Yeah.
does a long interview with the police. His English is his third language. His first
Yep.
two are Western desert dialects. He doesn't understand what's going on, and the cops, I think, tried to do the right thing, but they just had no experience dealing with people from remote communities, but people who also had cognitive impairments due to alcohol, petrol sniffing, marijuana use, that sort of thing. So in those cases, I think there should be a right to silence, and I don't think that should be used against you.
Okay, well,
So-
I've got no argument with you on that one. And
But it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fully aware that was the case in the UK. Yeah.
With the Indigenous matters, and Dr. Diana Eads was mentioned in your book. She's a linguistics expert, and I used her in the Barraville matter.
Right.
And she taught me a lot about investigating matters involving Indigenous witnesses and the English, the way that we misinterpret it, and gratuitous concurrence. Like, did you do that? And you say yes. And there was little scientific pieces of information that she gave me so I could properly understand what was going on. Yeah. I tried to have her give evidence at the trial for one of the Barraville murders, for the murder of Evelyn Greenup, because I think it's in Northern Territory and maybe Queensland. There might be other states now. There was a pre-trial warning where a trial had a heavy amount of Indigenous witnesses to explain to the jury what these misinterpretations might be.
Yes.
And I brought Diana Eads. I met her after an inquest, and she went to Barraville and prepared a report, but we couldn't get it in there. And the DPP said if the miscommunication becomes an issue in the trial, we can then call her. She sat of her, she wasn't getting paid for it. She did it because she was interested in it. Travelled to where the court was, sat there and gave me a whole range of examples where miscommunication was that the prosecutor and the defence missed because of the way that the Indigenous witness was answering questions. And
there's a whole in the case I talk about in the book. There was no interpreter present. The suspect, as he was then, clearly didn't understand a complex legal language. And I think the doctor, the expert you're just talking about, did give evidence in that case and spoke about, is it gratuitous concurrence?
Yeah.
And that was more or less, in some cases, people will agree, particularly if they're pressed over time.
I'll give it.
They'll just say yes because they feel as though they should. In this case, the young bloke, the miscommunication was everywhere in the case of Gene Gibson, who was arrested for the murder of a young white bloke. Even with his own legal aid lawyers, on a number of occasions, they didn't have an interpreter, and the legal aid lawyers trying to give him instructions. The legal aid lawyer doesn't speak Pintupi, and Gene Gibson doesn't speak English very well. And it was said later that one of the barristers said, what came out of the mouth of the legal aid lawyer and what went into Gene Gibson's brain is where it all went wrong.
Yeah.
Because it was completely, he didn't understand. Look, and the police, it's difficult.
I felt sorry for the police in that, and you raised it. You said that the police, we tried to do our best, and that's the sense I got the way the story was told in your book.
Yes.
The police were trying to do the right thing, but they did not have the expertise.
They didn't have the expertise. They didn't have the training.
Yeah.
There was a complete, I think, absence of training. And again, I think the experts said this, that that there was a complete misunderstanding on all sides. Part of the interview with Gene Gibson, the guy accused of murder in far north of WA, was recorded, and as she said in her evidence, on the face of it, it appeared the police were trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
They were respectful, they were patient, but it was clear that Gene Gibson did not understand it. They did bring in an interview friend.
Yeah.
As it turned out, the interview friend had the best of intentions.
But that worked against...
But it worked against Gene Gibson, because the interview friend who sat with Gene Gibson while he was being interrogated was, in a kinship sense in the Indigenous community, was like a grandfather to him.
Yeah.
So an authority figure. The police are asking questions in English, obviously. The interpreter friend is then translating into Pintupi to Gene Gibson. But the police obviously have no idea what's being said. So when they were saying, do you understand that you don't have to speak to us, you have the right to silence, or words to that effect, the interview friend was saying to Gene Gibson, son, you've got to tell them the truth. You've got to talk to them.
There goes his right to silence.
There goes his right to silence. And as it turns out, Gene Gibson didn't even want this person there.
Yeah.
There was a total misunderstanding about that, a complete breakdown in communication, in language. And, I think it's an example where it's difficult for the police, but it was a very sad case all round, because he was charged with murder, but a judge, I think, ruled some of the early interviews that were not recorded to be inadmissible.
Yeah.
So then, through his legal aid lawyer, because there were still a couple of other witnesses who'd said things against him, he pleads guilty to manslaughter. But even then, he didn't really understand what he was pleading to. Eventually, the conviction is quashed, and I remember one of the legal aid lawyers was asked if you think Gene understood what was being said to him, and she said something like, no, most of the times that I met him, he sat alone, staring in silence, staring at the wall.
Yeah.
He
And this was that from the Pilbara region?
Yeah,
this is isolation.
It's said to be the most remote community in Australia. I think it's about 700 k's from Alice Springs and about 900 to 1,000 k's from Broome. It's a speck in the Western Desert. It's a tiny community, Kiwakara.
And that is where the legal system gets very complicated. And lessons learnt, seeing that. I know we've on the back of Barraville, the parliamentary inquiry, one of the first recommendations was a training film to be made for New South Wales Police, speaking about the issues that I encountered and what the experts had said and how we could address it. So hopefully we are becoming more aware of it. But it's a complex thing.
It is.
People get caught up and
Yep. I think people sometimes want to see the justice system as like, a bit like, as one of my colleagues put it to me years ago, a bit like Marvel comics. There's evil villains and superheroes. Yeah. And there ain't nothing in between. Well, that's not life, as you and I both know. Things can get very complex and difficult for police, for suspects, particularly First Nations people. And there's a few examples of Aboriginal Australians in the book who have been wrongfully arrested, convicted and so on. for a variety of reasons. Identification evidence in one case. In the case of Eric Honeysett, who was a well-known Sydney criminal, it's an entirely different kettle of fish, but he did get framed back in the early 80s, back in those days where, as we were just discussing, confessions were suddenly made by a bloke who's been through the system and who's as tough as nails.
I'll let the people read the book on that one, but it's interesting in that he got verbal, ended up pleading guilty, and then they found the actual offender for it.
He pleaded guilty
because he knew, okay, well, I can't beat this system.
I can't beat the system, and if I plead guilty to a lesser charge, I won't be facing life, maximum 10 years. As he said later, I did some arithmetic.
Pleaded guilty to a
something
verbal.
he didn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got inadequate legal representation as well, because I think that plays a big part in a lot of miscarriages of justice. And I talk with the DPP. I know how hard they're working. So, what's your take on inadequate legal representation?
My only advice is, if you can afford it, get a good lawyer, somebody who's experienced in the criminal law. That's easier said than done. Yeah. For many people, they might have enough assets so they don't qualify for legal aid. Legal aid's overworked.
I mentioned the DPP, but legal aid is notoriously overworked.
But there's a number of cases where defence lawyers should have called an expert witness.
Yes, I like to think it's changing to a degree, because the media landscape has changed.
Yes.
You don't have to be affiliated with a large media organisation, and different forms of social media and all that. But and you would have known it early days as a journalist and covering crime matters, there was a real strong affiliation with the police, and it was basically, the police give you this information, that's what's reported, and there wasn't, generally speaking, a lot of scrutiny done about what was being provided. I think in this day and age there's more accountability and more scrutiny, and I think that can help, because media play a big part in some of the miscarriages of justice, because if you put the person like the Harry Blackburn one, that could have just rolled through, couldn't it? And
absolutely.
And you would have imagined the articles you could write about it. Convicted this serial rapist hiding as a police officer for all these years, and it would have gone just played out. Yeah,
well, it absolutely would have, and that's what the Royal Commissioner said. He could possibly, or even probably, have been convicted. And nobody would have known. I mean, he would have known. Yeah. And he had some pretty good lawyers whom I met with. So, but I think you're right. You're absolutely right. The system is better, certainly much better. There is more supervision of police. Yeah. There is more scrutiny, I think, from the media than there was back in the 70s and 80s, where, I was a police reporter, and you relied on the certain squads to, like homicide, armed robbery, that sort of thing, to get information. Yep. You had to have contacts in those squads, or the head of the CIB, or people senior. And there was probably this unacknowledged trade-off that if you got really good information, you were tipped off about somebody to be arrested for a big murder, there's a trade-off that you don't criticise the police. Yeah. That started to change in the 80s. And, the media definitely has a role to play. And I think there's a lot more scrutiny now than there was back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, I think it's good too in having this book out like this, and people that read it, and we're talking about it now, just understanding that there are mistakes made. And it's important that... And each story there is a clear lesson that can be learnt. And it's, if one would assume, lessons are learnt. Forensic evidence, scientific evidence is one that quite often causes problems in courts. Let's talk the story of the Jama, is it?
Farah Jama in Melbourne,
with the DNA evidence.
Yeah, the DNA evidence.
Neil, just when I thought you couldn't shock me anymore, you came up with that story, and I've gone, no.
I feel bad that you're reading this on holidays.
Yeah, there goes all the zen and all the chilled vibes I had.
It is part of it is a little confronting, but I think people will will go, wow. I didn't understand how that could happen. Now I understand how it can happen.
Yeah.
This case, this young bloke whose family had fled Somalia, they'd settled in Melbourne. He's about 18 or so. He's doing the equivalent of his HSC. He's, minding his own business. The case starts at a nightclub for mature adults. Apparently, anybody over 28 is mature. That was the age. Don't ask me why. A woman and a couple of her friends go to the nightclub. They preload in the car outside before they go in. She's 48 years old. She's she goes into the nightclub. It's a big nightclub. There are hundreds of people in there. She loses track of her friends. I think she goes in at something like 10:20 p.m. And this is seen on one of the CCTV cameras. She says, I spoke to a couple of blokes. I sat down, had a drink, had another drink, and then everything went blank.
Yep.
She's found in the women's toilets, unconscious. The door's locked.
Yep.
They have great difficulty getting her out. The security women and a patron have to jump over and help carry her out. She's taken to hospital, obviously. She's unconscious. She's very blurry. She says, I don't know how it happened. I didn't have that many drinks. I'm worried I might have been assaulted. And that's fair enough.
Yep.
She's
not knowing what's
happened.
She's
not knowing what's happened. Once she said that, certain protocols were put in place. A doctor's called in and there's within this hospital which she's been taken, there's something called a crisis care unit. And the doctor, who's experienced and a very good doctor, does swabs and tests and takes samples and so on, which are then put on slides. It's all done within this small room. The results come back later. They have found sperm. So to all intents and purposes, she has been raped.
Yep.
She just can't remember anything. She's passed out. They do DNA. This takes some weeks.
Yeah.
The DNA matches that of the 18-year-old Somali bloke, Farajama. This is a story within a story because it's difficult to explain because how did his DNA come to be on the database? Anyway, his DNA is on the database. It matches that found on the woman from the nightclub. The police then naturally launch an investigation. They go and arrest him, and he's eventually charged with the rape of the woman. But even then, the police are a bit concerned because he's a tallish, young, good-looking Somali bloke.
And he would have stood out in that club.
It's a nightclub for mature couples and singles. I think it's pretty much white people. Yep. Nobody has seen anybody that matches his description. Security have not seen him. Staff have not seen him. The victim herself says, I did not speak to any black men that night. That was her quote. So, and there's nothing on CCTV, although some of the CCTV doesn't work, as often happens. This case rests wholly on the DNA, which they've taken from the woman and which matches Farajama, the young bloke. He says, I didn't do it. I've never been to the nightclub. I've never been near the nightclub. The police do all the right checks, no fingerprints. He's not near there anywhere. They check bank statements, phones, all the stuff that you should have been done. They put the brief up to the DPP, and even the DPP says this is a unique case because that's all we've got.
Yeah.
We've got nothing else. There's no corroboration at all.
Relying solely on the DNA.
Relying solely on the DNA. What happens in court is that, the prosecution says DNA is essentially infallible. It is 800, this is the actual figure that was used, 800 billion times more likely to have come from the young man than anyone else, which, as you have pointed out previously, means you'd have to go to another galaxy.
Universe.
So, I mean, I sort of, I don't understand those figures. I don't understand how you can reach that number, but that's what's presented, and that's, if you're the member of the jury, I mean, that's got to be convincing.
Oh, it's him.
You've got to say it's him. Even though nobody's seen him at the nightclub, there's no evidence he's ever been to the nightclub that night or any other night. There's nothing to put him even within cooee.
Yeah.
And there are some alibi witnesses for him, but they're members of his family. And in the witness box, they're not very impressive because they've never been in a court before. Miscommunication again. He's the jury, to their credit, they're on the ball. They ask a question of the judge: how is this man's DNA on the database?
Yeah.
And this goes back to a point you were alluding to earlier or mentioned earlier. They're not allowed to be told how it's on the database. And the judge says words to the effect of, don't worry about that. That's not something you have to consider. You just go with the evidence. They go with the evidence, and they obviously, the only evidence, DNA, they go, well, it can't be wrong. Prosecutor says it can't be wrong. It's not contaminated, has not been contaminated. He's found guilty. He goes to jail. It's not until a long time later that an appeal is sort of lodged, and to his credit, a lawyer within the office of the DPP starts looking at the case, and he wonders how the DNA got on the database. And he goes back to the very beginning, because they'd all concentrated on, there must have been contamination at the police laboratory.
Yeah.
The police lab says, no, because, and they present
protocols.
All the protocols have been followed. They present cogent reasons why there is no contamination. The solicitor from the DPP, because an appeal's coming up, goes back to the hospital. As it turns out, the night before the woman who felt she'd been raped has come in and been examined, about 20 hours earlier, a young woman had come in and been examined in the very same room by the very same doctor. And she too had had swabs taken. And she had said she'd been sexually assaulted. That's what she said at that stage.
Yeah.
She then withdraws her complaint, and as a later inquiry found, she substantially agreed with the version that had been given by Farajama that a week or so earlier, I can't remember the exact timeline, she, the young woman, had had sex with him and two other men, and she was, she withdrew her complaint. And the men said it was consensual. She more or less agreed, and that was found to be the fact in a subsequent inquiry.
Yeah.
I don't want to, sort of say that this is commonplace or anything, but this is where the case has gone awry. It's in the hospital. The younger woman has come in on, say, Friday night. The older woman from the nightclub has come in on the Saturday, both examined in the same room.
Yeah.
That's where his DNA has come from, but it's been contaminated there.
Yeah.
So that when it matches, but it's been contaminated on one of the slides. As it turns out, these units, the crisis care units, aren't cleaned properly. There's been contamination there. So this is particularly difficult for the woman who thought she'd been assaulted, because a bloke's been convicted.
Yeah.
And
thinking, why I'm unconscious.
Yeah,
this has
absolutely.
been so going through all the trauma associated
she's gone
with that.
through all the trauma. She gives evidence in the court case, says, look, I can't remember.
Yeah.
She tells the truth. She's done absolutely the right thing. But it now turns out and there's this inquiry led by Frank Vincent QC. It now turns out the contamination of the DNA happened in the hospital at the very beginning. And there is in fact no sexual assault in the nightclub, and the woman comes to accept that, which would obviously be traumatic in itself.
I'm thinking your mind would be all over the place.
But in his inquiry, Frank Vincent sort of talks about common sense and says total faith was put in the DNA. Everybody jumped over all these hurdles that this bloke had never been seen, and common sense tells you that if he had been at the nightclub, he would have been seen. And also the timeline. The woman...
Small window of opportunity.
Very small window of opportunity. She enters the nightclub at 10:20. She's found in the toilet at 10:50. On her own statement, she's, after 10:20, has bought a drink, sat down, had a cigarette, spoken to a few blokes. She wasn't there to pick up or anything. She was just there for relaxation, to have a good night, to wind down. But there's, a 20 or 30-minute window where, as Frank Vincent said, I mean, the timeline didn't fit. People have jumped over all these obvious common sense things that tell you this can't have happened because of DNA. And, DNA is not infallible.
Well,
without corroboration. There was no other corroboration. That was the sole evidence, and it was wrong.
That's a concerning thing, isn't it? And then that everyone involved in the investigation stepped away and, we've got the DNA, and not looking at... It was almost like physically impossible for that to occur when you look at it now, and we sit here and we say we've got the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
But even at the time, you're thinking such a small window of opportunity. He wasn't seen in the club. The location she was found... You'd have to have doubts, but what you've raised here with DNA, because it's getting forensic science is improving so much. I dare say when you walk out of here, if the police grabbed hold of you, you'd have some of my DNA on you. And that's what we've got to be careful of. It's such a fine thing, but mistakes can be made.
I think the big mistake was that it was the only evidence, and that's what Vincent QC said. I mean, there was nothing to put him in the nightclub in the vicinity. She said, "I've never seen him before." It sort of defied common sense, and as you say, there was a very narrow window. And it goes to your point that unless there's some other evidence, DNA can be contaminated. I'm not saying, obviously DNA is an invaluable tool for police.
Definitely.
Obviously, and it's improving all the time, but mistakes can be made.
Yeah. Well, it's a cautionary tale, and I think sometimes it's got to be spelled out to everyone in an obvious way. This is where mistakes can be made because, as an investigator, we've got the DNA. His semen's found on the woman. This is science. 1 in 800 billion. We can't argue with that.
Can't argue with that.
But common. Again, we started off the discussion in part 1 talking about common sense in court. There is common sense that we need to hang on to, isn't there? Yeah,
I think particularly. I mean, the jury did ask the question, and this goes to your point of what juries are not allowed to know. If I guess it's the prejudicial...
probative value.
They might have gone... But even though they weren't told, I mean, they must have gone back in and said, he must have been convicted or charged with something because his DNA's there.
The way the judge tried to answer that, I'm thinking, what is the discussion going on in the jury room? He must be a rapist.
That's pretty much what I'd be saying. Well, he's definitely come to the attention of the police.
Yeah.
They've taken his DNA for a reason, and it would probably be... or it could be sexual assault.
And that would
and he's got off.
And that would add to the jury going, okay, there is no other evidence supporting it. The police wouldn't have charged him. We've got the DNA. We know it's him.
It's him.
And that's why I think the jury need to have as much information as possible so they can make informed decisions. Neil, we could talk all day about this, unfortunately, because it would have been a better book if it was Great Convictions. But falsely convicted. Hey, on the cover of your book, a meticulous unravelling of Australia's most horrendous judicial failures. Mercer's book reads like a thriller, but at its heart, it's the devastation wreaked on innocent victims of the legal system. Now, that's signed off by Kate McClymont.
Yes.
She's a scary lady.
I know.
I've a lot of respect for her.
I've known Kate for many years.
Yeah, and
many years. She's a colleague of mine and a friend. So she was very generous in her praise.
Well, the reputation she has in the media and journalism, and I know that when she's on a case, she tends to get to the bottom of it.
She does. I think it's called tenacity.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I was going to say like a dog with a bone as a compliment.
Yes.
That the way she goes after stories, but she touches on something there, and I think it's great. It reflects on the book that someone with Kate's reputation does a endorsement like that. But the devastation wreaked on the innocent victims.
Yeah.
And we've had a discussion, we've had a few laughs, we've dissected different investigations. But it does have an emotional impact, doesn't it? Not just emotional, physical. It destroys lives if we get it wrong.
Yeah, it does. It must have, particularly like one of the cases in there, the bloke spent 20 years in jail. I mean, there's 20 years lost of your kids growing up,
you can't get back.
Which you never get back. You lose friends. The people, their lives move on. As that particular bloke told me, he said, people would write at the beginning when I first went in. Friends would write, friends would visit, and it sort of slowly stopped. Not because they were they'd forgotten him, but their lives had moved on.
Yeah.
His life stood still in a jail cell, and that's the cost of it. It does turn people's lives upside down, and some of them just never recover.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for coming on I Catch Killers again for a second time.
Thanks.
And I know you've won Walkley Awards and other awards, but that must sit real high in your success, high points of your career, coming on I Catch Killers.
It does
twice.
Indeed, Gary, twice. I'll be working on the next time.
Okay, very
thanks
good.
Thanks for having me.
And also, thank you for pointing out, as we discussed today, where these mistakes happen. They will. We're human. Mistakes happen, but if we learn from the mistakes, it puts the system in a better place. And I think that's an important message to come out.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.